Well, good morning, everyone. Welcome to my regular weekly update from the Capitol. Been a bit of a bumpy week. I want to start with two comments, then we'll get to the news of the day and the news of the week. First, on a monthly basis, Tim Kaine and I do a breakfast for different groups around Virginia. Last month, it was the folks going into our military academies. Sometimes it's to celebrate things like Hispanic Heritage Month or other issues. This morning, we had almost a record turnout of scouts who've earned either the Eagle categorization or Gold or Eagle if they're Girl Scouts. And to see this many young people turn out in record numbers who still believe so much in our country and the values of scouting. I have to say I was a Boy Scout, but I never made Eagle. I think I made it to first class, and I'm not sure I even passed my not tying merit badge, but it was a good way to start the morning. The other, I've talked to a lot of you since, the tragic news of Lindsey Graham's passing out. Lindsey and I disagreed on a lot of things, but you knew where he stood. He was passionate about advocating, particularly for America's role in the world, and he will be greatly missed. To the news now. One of the reasons this has been such a disturbing week to me is that tonight Donald Trump is going to address the nation on a question of election security, which I have huge concerns about. This president has never been willing to acknowledge that he lost the 2020 election. This president is obsessed with trying to relitigate the 2020 election, particularly his loss in Georgia. And as I've said repeatedly, my fear is he could use not intelligence analysis, but a single factoid, true or not, as an excuse to try to weaponize this year's election, bring in ICE agents, shut down polling, try to resuscitate his SAVE Act, which the American people don't want, that frankly eliminates voting rights. And every indication is that's where he's headed tonight. And we need to hold him accountable. I would point out in Intel 101 is that the intelligence community literally gets hundreds, if not thousands, of incoming pieces of information every day. And their job is to analyze that and try to come up with conclusions. They often will represent a minority view. But one thing is true. While there may have been nations in 2020 that tried to influence using social media, Russia, Iran, China elections, the full consensus was those influence activities had no overall effect. And then on the question of interference, where you actually try to get in and manipulate votes or actually change the results, there was no interference, successful interference in the 2020 election. Now, Donald Trump, remember, was in charge, and his administration was in charge of the 2020 elections. And in the immediate aftermath, the then head of the cybersecurity agency, Chris Krebs, said it was the safest elections in American history. That truthful statement earned his almost immediate firing. But I am very concerned about where Trump, with his obsessiveness about refusing to acknowledge that he lost in 2020 and then trying to use executive orders or other things to undermine our nation's democracy. And I appeal to Democrats, Republicans, independents alike, if you care about fair elections and free elections in our country this year, then I would expect you to take most of what President Trump says tonight with a grain of salt until it is proven or disproven otherwise. Never thought I'd have to make a comment like that about a president of the United States, but we have a long series of examples of his own words this year that raises my concern level so high. The other issue that's obviously back on the front burner is the ongoing war, the forever war in Iran. Remember, this is Donald Trump was going to end these forever wars. This is a war of choice. So as gas prices tick up, as diesel fuel, which is already back up to $5 a gallon. And remember, diesel fuels most of our trucks. Trucks deliver most of our goods to the grocery store or other stores. That's all going to be passed on to the consumer. So with inflation rising, with the war restarted, even under President Trump's own assumptions. He tried to restart the 60-day clock on a War Powers Act. This is a war of choice. The American people don't want it to take place. It's what happens when you start a war of choice without a plan on how you finish. And I'm going to continue to press his administration, one, to end the war, but two, to come out with a plan on how we get ourselves out of this intractable situation with Iran. And remember, again, none of the original goals, regime change, getting a hold of the nuclear enriched uranium, getting rid of Iran's ballistic missiles or drones, or making sure the Strait of Hormuz is reopened, none of those have been accomplished. And yet we've spent literally close to $60 billion on military hardware. We've had 13 American soldiers lose their lives, hundreds wounded. Our standing in the world. One of the things that struck me this morning was there was international polling coming out showing that now China is much more admired around the world than the United States. That is a travesty, and in many ways I think it is brought about by this president's foreign policy approach, not only against our adversaries, but candidly against our allies as well. So with that, why don't I turn it over to Catherine, and I'll be happy to take your questions.
All right, and you were hearing just an update from Senator Mark Warner as he held a media availability earlier this morning.